Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I'm your host, Douglas Gabriel, and today I'm speaking with my good friend Michael McKibben from Leader Technologies. Hello, Michael.
Top of the morning to you.
Well, you've shocked us again, and now you've almost put us over the edge with your new article.
I'm sorry.
Well, you're doing what Betsy has demanded, and she's a field marshal, she's a general. And she said this is Serco Awareness Month. Now, you've made us so aware of Serco, you're going to make us vomit. Because you have figured out what we couldn't figure out, which is, what is their motivation? Why are they involved in so many different industries, which they're not even experienced at, but every one of these industries is in a way controlling human beings, controlling their movement, controlling their data, controlling war, controlling our economy, controlling our airplanes, controlling the buses, everything that moves. And we kept saying, what is going on with Serco? Why would they have so many fingers in so many pies? And you have figured it out. And it's kind of scary because it goes back to that Richard C. Walker Internet of Things type patent, which is basically aggressive remote control of everything on the face of the earth that moves, including humans. So you've connected those two up in a way that is somewhat frightening, but is definitely indicative of what we fear is our future that is dominated by Big Brother. So tell us about your research. You've been in the mines now for a week. You came out with this great article. You've put it all together. What can you tell us about Serco?
Okay, first of all, it wasn't just me. There's a whole bunch of people working on this, and thanks for the kudos. You said it well. We looked at the history of Serco and read their annual reports, and we had various people digging into various annual reports, both here in the U.S. and also in the U.K. at Companies House. And nothing, Serco, on the surface, is the strangest looking company in the world, because it seems like there's nothing they can't do and don't do. And we were saying, what is the correlation between a company that manages parking services and parking meters and also builds nuclear weapons? And, by the way, they also do space programming and the space manufacturing. They also manage immigration services in the UK, and including asylum properties. And it just goes on and on. They're in hospitals and prisons in Australia, and they manage about 68 of our air traffic control towers in the U.S. They also manage now all patents that go through the patent office. They actually handle all of the application process for the U.S. Patent Office. They got $1.2 billion to manage the Obamacare contract, which is odd given they're a British company. And it just goes on and on. And they have a list of companies in their latest annual report that's published in London, which lists about 70 different subsidiaries that are spread out all over the planet, with two outside of the UK, prominently in the US, in Australia, in the Middle East, and one other place. And they're just involved in everything. They've got their fingers in all kinds of pies. And business 101, you need to focus. And there's nothing about this company that's focused. So we were trying to make sense of it, and yes, and yet they have over $6 billion in annual revenue. So either somebody inside Serco is a really good salesman, or something fishy is going on. And what we were asking ourselves is, what is it? We couldn't make sense of it. I'll stop there and let you react to that.
SES. We had the month before been revealing the senior executive services and the way that they are the more or less deep state shadow government. Can't be fired. Obama hired them, Trump can't fire them. And they are just really the slimy underbelly of the bureaucracy of the federal government. And they seem to be the ones who always give Serco every single contract. And it's astounding the amount of contracts you found, the amount of hiding through subsidiary companies, the amount of probably tax-free dollars going out of this country into a British corporation, which is directly connected to BAE, the British Aerospace Engineering, one of the second largest military contractors in America. Strange that the Brits are actually second or third, depending on how you want to cut the pie, and that they are directly connected to Lockheed Martin, and that Lockheed Martin is directly connected to all of the uranium and even uranium treaties with Europe. And somehow Lockheed Martin, through Serco, seems to pretty much control, Lockheed Martin and BAE, pretty much control the nuclear industry of the world. This is so shocking that any company that could go from, as you say, from parking meters to nuclear bombs. This isn't possible. No company can do this.
It makes no sense on the surface. And we said, okay, we don't know what this means, but we just kept digging up all these facts. And we just kept laying them on the table and then putting them on a storyboard. And people were sending us data from all over the planet. And the storyboard was filling up, and it just wasn't making sense what the logic is for a company to be a specialist in so many areas, because as we know, when you're a jack of all trades, you're a specialist in none. And yet what these people seem to be is highly skilled at getting contracts. Now, whether they deliver or not, there's a lot of writing out there in Australia, in the U.S., and the U.K., about Serco's problems in being able to deliver. I mean, they even manage the bullet train between London and Glasgow, or in Edinburgh. I mean, it's just crazy the number of different things they do. And so, as you say, what we started asking ourselves is, how is SES involved, and how do they pass the contracts to Serco? And what is Serco's real mission? Because if you read their written mission statements, they don't mean anything. It's just like, we want to help the world be a better place and be more organized, and we want to do all this with full accountability. And whenever you read that in government documents now, or not government documents, but corporate documents, they're hiding something, because they can't tell you what they do, so they write all these flowery words that throw off most people because they don't have time to dig into it. But our team of researchers have now dug into it, and by the way, they own a large pathology company in the UK, and I guess that pathology company was really the key that unlocked the door for our researchers. And you got to ask yourself, what is a company involved in all these things like parking services? Why are they dealing in pathology? What is that? Testing of blood and human tissue, and where are they going with this? So, cut a long story short, you did a number of shows on the Richard C. Walker patents for the Internet of Things that started being filed at the U.S. Patent Office in about 1996, where they started discussing a patent to be able to remotely control vehicles, and then that morphed into ships and trains and cars, and then it morphed into being able to control and track human beings. And actually, in the patents are discussions of putting chips in people to control their motor responses, to be able to put them to sleep. And the total in this patent of pages is about 2,000 pages when you actually put it all together. So we started looking and focusing on this idea of the Internet of Things, and the pathology issue was concerning because that's obviously dealing with death many times. Why do people die, and what's the cause? and why? And we're asking ourselves, why would Serco want to be a specialist in reporting on death? And I know that's oversimplifying what pathology is, but stick with me here. So we started looking at the Serco patent, and we knew that, not the Serco patent, but the Walker patents, and we knew that the Walker patents incorporated 5G, which is this new technology, wireless technology, satellite technology that the tech left is pushing very hard to implement all over the planet with. Eventually, they want to have something like 25,000 satellites orbiting the Earth and raining down Wi-Fi on us, which logic says there's something that can't be good in that, and we now know from various experts that it's not healthy, and that 5G is a milliwave. It's even shorter wavelength than microwave, and that in any kind of wattage, it can kill you. In lower wattages, it can alter your brain state. It can attack different parts of your brain. It can put you to sleep. It can cause you to forget. So there's all different levels of what this 5G Wi-Fi can be dialed up to do. So we started looking at this 5G issue, the Walker patents, Serco, and the Internet of Things. And when we got all of those things on the board, describe it like the Transformer movie. Everything started locking into place. You started hearing all these clicking sounds, click, 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 click. And we realized what Serco is there to do. Serco is there to manage this Walker patent implementation all over the planet, and then to be able to dial up the 5G and its effects, which will include killing people, and then also deal with the aftermath, and also deal with immigration, with healthcare, with prisons, with pathology. And we said to ourselves, oh my gosh, Serco was organized to manage the reduction, the eugenics reduction of various countries, and then to deal with the aftermath. I didn't mention that Serco just in January of this year received a $610 million contract to manage FEMA Region 9 in the U.S. Now, what does the company that's managing FEMA Region 9 have to do with processing patents at the patent office?
Well, they're also involved in climate control, and the FEMA area you talk about would have served California and the areas that were impacted by the drought, where they actually predicted there was going to be a mass migration out of California into those areas. And so one has to wonder, because IBM is controlled Nexstar, and that's IBM was, of course, directly connected to Agilent and HP and right. Richard C. Walker, and the creation of this completely all-encompassing remote control, aggressive manipulation control, right? And aggressive remote control of human beings. And we came onto this because studying the QRS-11, the Clipper right. chip, and finding that, yes, the uninterruptible autopilot in every single airplane since the first hijackings in America have made sure that every airplane can be taken over from the ground. Therefore, 9/11 did not happen the way we were told. And so then we looked further and we found that this company, that this gentleman, Richard C. Walker, out of HP, just comes out and creates one of the highest venture capital funded groups of all times in technology. And he creates this company, Agilent, and then he writes in
1999, by the way.
And he writes a patent to absorb all other patents that would have anything to do with Big Brother controls. And when you say pathology, that's because in Britain, they control the death boards. Serco actually controls the pathological chemical analysis of people that determines whether they will receive treatment in the British medical system. True. So they right. literally are the death committees. They're the death councils. Not only that, there's $80 billion in question of fraud with Serco right now in the highest courts in Britain. And they have demonstrated by analysis of a number of different schools and prisons and things that they run that they are only efficient to about 65%. Then 35% is just completely lost. We find that in America. Whenever you find that someone slipped through the cracks because they didn't have background check that was followed through on, like some of these murderers that have come into the news, it's always Serco that has failed us. Serco fails us all the time, but they don't care because they're looking at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is simply taking over the world through a global network of control that literally includes wetworks put in human beings, as you said, chips that not only control their consciousness and the on-off switch of their brain, but control their limbs. So that if you are moving, they say, and they've written patents, and the all-encompassing patent will absorb any patents that do this, and there are many patents that do this. They implant chips and they can control whether you move or not. And they can make your arm move. They can make your legs move. They can control your body from a distance. That cannot be done without the all-pervasive nature of 5G, which is like a cloud. And it also, 5G, from the 24,000 satellites that are being launched, now have been given approval in America to be launched by Elon Musk, SpaceX, and by Qualcomm and Amazon, called OneWeb. 24,000, as you pointed out. As they launch those satellites, they will destroy our atmosphere and the Earth will die. Period. There needs to be an instantaneous moratorium put on launching satellites into space that ray 5G down on humans, because we know that there's experimentation going on now in South Africa where they're seeing whether or not 5G can be completely pervasive in communities that don't have phones. So if they're experimenting on South Africans, what do you think they're experimenting on right now? Eugenics.
Well, that is one set of phraseology that a lot of these companies use to justify their existence. They say they're going to help the underserved communities in Africa with this new 5G technology and with all these services that these guys are ostensibly providing. So another thing we did is we started correlating SES across these different activities, and with the assumption now that Serco is the corporate arm of the implementation of the Walker patents, it all started falling into place. We have the SES in general, the 10,000 Obama's Army. Then we have the Department of Justice 500, which handles their compensation, and then we have the Overseas Private Investment Corp, which is run by SES people. Then we have the Millennium Challenge Corporation, which handles it's more OPIC-type money for aid that mostly goes to Africa. Then we have USAID, which is probably the most well-known of this group. Then we have the Aerospace Corporation, which I had not heard of until we started looking into these activities. And it is another SES-run corporation that gets billions of dollars to help the U.S. manage space policy. Now, how much help do we need from bureaucrats to manage space policy? The Aerospace Corporation, I had never heard of it. I asked people from Boeing and Lockheed and others if they'd ever heard of it. Almost nobody had ever heard of it. A few had. And then we've got Five Eyes, the intelligence activities where the U.S., the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia have teamed up and essentially bypass all of their national laws through this Five Eyes group that basically when an element of activity is going to violate the law in New Zealand, they just ask somebody in Australia to do it, or the U.S. or the UK or Canada. And so in that way, they've completely skirted all of our privacy and security laws. And then we've got the Crown agents, and we've discovered actual contracts where the Crown, SES has given the Crown agents in America large contracts, 10, 20, $30 million contracts to provide service to the U.S. And then we've got all the SES members in the Highlands group, which you introduced us to. And then the SES is crawling all over the IBM Eclipse Foundation. and then all of Richard Walker's associations at HP and Agilent. So what we see is the SES is running the world behind the scenes. I think that explains why they're so arrogant in Washington and why they think they're not going to lose. Because in addition to all those different organizations and activities, they've got this overarching organization called Serco that's implementing their plan right now. I mean, how is it possible that Serco, a British company, would be given $610 million by FEMA to manage a whole region of FEMA?
And when you added it all up, Serco with SI International, RCI, another subsidiary, and CACI, and all these different subsidiaries. When you added it all up, what is the amount that Serco, with all of its subsidiaries, got in 1 year?
You know what? I haven't done that calculation yet. You asked me about that yesterday. Oh,
I
you did?
added
Okay,
yours
what
up.
is it?
It depends on how you want to cut the pie, but it's like $14 billion a year to $21 billion a year, depending upon how you want to cut the pie. Now, could you explain the golden share and who it is that's truly, deeply at the foundation of Serco?
Yes, Serco is a British company. There are a number of names for the company, but basically it's Serco. It's Serco Group Limited, Serco Limited. They've got a number of Serco Holdings Limited. So they pass the cash around within this group of companies. But at the core of the company are is a British knight who is appointed by is knighted by the Queen, takes an oath of loyalty to the Queen, who runs Serco. Serco is a third owner in British Nuclear Fuels organization in England, and that company holds a golden share that directly traces to the Crown, the British Crown. So one thing you got to realize is all these control mechanisms are convoluted. So if you're just coming in from the outside, it may seem very confusing. But the bottom line is nothing of this strategic nature goes on in the UK without the Queen holding a golden share or the Crown holding a golden share, whoever's the monarch at that point. So the bottom line is all this Serco activity can trace back to the Crown. And so all these contracts that we're giving Serco in our country related to our strategic infrastructure, like patents, like emergency management, like airport traffic control, in the end trace their controls back to England. Now, to address that conflict of interest issue, these attorneys have papered up various documents to say, well, okay, fine, you're controlled by a foreign corporation, but oh, by the way, you promised not to involve that corporation in any issues of national security. Wink, wink, nod, nod.
And yet they control our uranium through Urenco, they control Lockheed, they control BAE, they control our military. So tell me, are we a British Commonwealth nation?
Well, I never wanted to believe that. I used to live in the UK, and I have many dear friends in the UK. Nigel Farage refers to them as Middle England, and I live in the Midwest. So there are a lot of good people in England. So this is about the power infrastructure in the UK that goes way back hundreds of years. It's now very clear to me that the American Revolution was only won on paper, and that is the propaganda that we've been given, when in fact what happened after the British Army left is that the British bankers and lawyers moved in, and they've been in operation through our money supply ever since. And we are still living with the aftermath of that. So to shorten that answer, I believe that we still are under the influence of the British Crown in the operation of our country. And this Serco activity is a good example of how pervasive that is this very day.
Well, there's the first estate, and that's the church. They're tax exempt. They have all the power. They even have their own law, curia, canon law. And then there's the second estate. That would be the monarchy. And then there's the third estate, us poor common people, us plebeians. And the fourth estate is, of course, what we would call citizens' intelligence. It's the true news media that tries to inform the commoners of what's really going on and let them know who's manipulating them. But in England, what did they do? They merged the monarchy with the church. Now, the Queen is the head of the church. She's also the head of the Bank of England. She's also has veto power of anything the Parliament does. She also is informed every day and is the only person who knows who are on the committees that control the government, and each day with her red box she receives those reports. She's the only one in the country who actually knows what's going on. People in top committees controlling major sections of the government don't know who are in the other committees. And it is illegal to question the business practices or business at all of the royalty. So the concept of monarchy has been transferred through the Inns of Court and through the Bank of England. And what we see is that they drifted over into America and they became our central bank and they became our court system. And we are now doing exposés on this, and there'll be a new one coming out, intelligence report from the Anonymous Patriots. And what it's going to show is that the Inns of Court, the four Inns of Court, which the Queen is a member of one of them, that is simply transferring titles of royalty and basically a higher level of existence to the people who are in the Inns of Court, practicing under the bar and taking an oath to the rule of law. This is the same thing that happens in America. And lawyers are esquires. And there were initially laws against having any royalty in America because of these very things. But what happened? The lawyers in the courts. What is a judge? A judge is a monarch. A judge is in control of whatever they want in their courtroom. They can make completely capricious decisions based upon no case law, the Constitution, or anything else. So they act as independent monarchs. And then the landed gentry are the esquires who serve them. So what we're seeing here is the British system has never really left the American system. But we did not know the mechanisms until we started doing this research just some months ago when we joined forces with Michael McKibben and great investigators, friends at Americans for Innovation, and all that you guys do at Leader Technologies still do. And as we put these thoughts together, we were able to see that what used to be considered conspiracy theories, we now have created the indictable evidence to show that they are not theories and they are not conspiracies.
Yeah, we have the actual contract now. I had heard many of these things over the years and had never taken the time to dig. But now that our researchers have actually dug up the contracts, this is all very real, folks. The money is flowing. Our taxpayer money is flowing like a great rushing flood out of our country. It's being siphoned through the British banks in London, UK. And then it's being fed through organizations like this Serco to implement this monstrous strategy they've got to lower the population. And this issue of it's not a conspiracy theory. Eugenics has been around a long time. Many proponents, including the current one everybody's aware of, which is Planned Parenthood. Why is that dog so hard to kill? Well, it's because it's a key element of this globalist plan to reduce the population, which they have openly stated in various forums. We just double-checked everything in the last few days. They want to reduce the population, especially in the UK and in England, by up to 70 to 75%, and their goal is to do that by 2025.
And this is
their documents.
Yeah, and it's not a conspiracy theory because we know and we can name the people. Bill Gates' father was the lawyer for Sanger and the Planned Parenthood. He is a eugenist. He's one of the most famous eugenists. He wants to kill people because the population is too great, and for the rich people, they need less people and more resources for themselves. So I'm sorry to have to list some of them, like Oprah, like Bill Gates, like everyone at Monsanto, because what is happening in Africa right now, Bill Gates went over and inoculated village after village with inoculations that cause sterility, and now he's being sued because of this. And everyone knows it. It's in the news. He was even bragging about the fact that his new green policy in Africa would reduce the population between 17 to 27%, and he was laughing about it and rejoicing about it when he was speaking about it.
Right. That's on video. That's available now.
And of course,
somebody snuck into his speech and got that on video.
And it was at the same time promoting the fact that Monsanto has gone over and he's promoted using GMO products, which basically in India there is an epidemic of farmers killing themselves because of the GMO products, because they can't do it the way that they've always done it, which is, of course, raise their own plants that have their own seeds instead of having to buy seeds. So in India and Africa, he's killing people right and left because he's wiping out farming, because he's supporting Monsanto seed only, and he's promoting these inoculations. And the World Health Organization, the reason that Trump defunded it by 50%, I believe, was because they found out about these inoculations, and he says, I'm not going to have anything to do with it. So this is an open plan of the United Nations to depopulate the world. This is not a conspiracy. I could name many other people who were involved in this, but let's put it this way. There are two things that the richest billionaires in the world want. First off, to extend their life at the cost of others if necessary, and that's the reason they do so many blood transfusions with teenagers. And it's perfectly legal once you're 18. And then the second thing they want is depopulation. Why? As they've said, they have so much money, all they need is more time to spend it and not so many people to get in their way so that they can have the resources instead of sharing them with others. This is the logic of a Peter Thiel who says the only business plan that works with technology is a monopoly. And corporations were all created by monopolies, and they were monopolies. They were liveries. When the monarchy would say, I give you a charter, like a charter to go to America, or I allow you to incorporate, but you must do this one specific task for this many years, and then after that you don't get to do it. It's a granted monopoly by the monarchy. Later, the parliament started to do that for other incorporated groups. But there was no legal liability limitations on these corporations. If they had a problem, they had to pay for it. Now we've turned corporations into being humans. They have more rights than a person. So the common person in America who's supposed to have unalienable rights, we don't, because there are esquires above us, landed gentry, nobility, who control the courts, which is the monarchy, and the elite. And if you want to count the federal government, that would then include Serco, USAID, all the ones you mentioned, OPIC, all those. And by the way, when you mention those, that's $100 billion a year that is spent outside of this country for no good purpose. We get no returns from any of that $100 billion that we give away. And so you've always heard how, developing countries need our help. That isn't what's going on. We are manipulating and fleecing.
Well, one of our researchers is trying to get information on OPEC right now, and they're stonewalling him, and he was specifically looking for accountability reports on these hundreds of millions that they send to various places around the planet, and can't even get it.
There is no accountability. It's just like with Serco. They say, please show us your records, and they can only produce 65% of the records. 35% of the people that they're supposed to be keeping track of, they're not even in their system. And so they're getting sued on a massive level. Serco should simply be closed down, and any transnational corporation that is not hiring Americans in America and paying American taxes should not ever receive a government contract period.
Well, I was just speaking with one of my shareholders before this interview, and he's retired from the steel business, and we were talking about there seem to be two groups of people in our country. There seem to be people who work hard, create real value, and sustain our economy. And then there's this whole other group, like Serco, like SES, that do nothing but suck that cash away. And one of the things that's becoming very clear to me is that none of those people are creative. They don't actually do any work. They shuffle paper, they put money in their pockets, and they take care of their friends. That's their main job. So our proposal to President Trump is you can defund this entire cabal, and we won't notice a difference. Everybody's afraid that we'll lose something or we won't get some service if he takes all this down at once. And so he's got to do it a little bit at a time, is the logic. I'm not so sure that's true. I think if all of that cash to all of these organizations stopped tomorrow, you and I on Main Street would not even notice they were gone.
We would benefit. We would have an infrastructure. We would not have a national debt. We would not have an IRS taking our money before we get it. We would be able to own our land without having to pay taxes on it year after year after year. We have solutions to these things. They may seem like gigantic problems, but the solutions are quite simple. Look at it. Do not hire any company that is a transnational company for a government contract. Period. Done. But before that, let's just take an example. George Soros is the enemy of America. $18 billion that he just gave to his Open Society Foundation, Tides Foundation, which are going to then give it to 184 non-government organizations that they support. What happened? He stole that money from the stock market through his quantum hedge fund in Caracas. He hasn't paid any taxes. How can this man then turn around and donate money to not-for-profit organizations when it is stolen money? Okay, here's the solution. Real simple. Who is the monarch of offshore accounts? That would, of course, be Queen Elizabeth. In the Commonwealth, most of her countries are offshore accounts and tax havens and basically illegal. And they do what?
Right. By the way, Serco's got holdings in Guernsey, in Jersey, which are two islands off the coast of the UK, and then Cayman Islands, and in just about every tax haven you can imagine. And when you actually go look up what those companies do, it's clearly a shell company that just moves laundered money around.
And you've pointed out that Serco uses money from the Cayman Islands, huge, hundreds of millions of dollars to buy subsidiary companies that then basically, once you buy the 25 companies doing the work for the government, you have a monopoly, and they just use offshore account money to filter into this country to buy existing United States corporations and fold them into their illegal, basically fleecing of America.
Well, and if somebody says, well, how do they get away with it? It's pretty easy when you do one of these bogus criminal transactions, and then if anyone challenges you, they're going to take it to court, and in that court you've already got a judge that's in your pocket, so the case is going to be thrown out. So that's what's going on here. It's a huge global Ponzi scheme.
And corporations, because they're higher than a human being and higher than a citizen, and they're given rights that are extraordinary and beyond the rights of human beings, they get tax breaks, they get to cheat, they get to move money out of the country. I don't get to do that. They get to do whatever they want, basically, and none of them ever go to jail. They simply get fines, and we're going to be showing some of these corporate crimes soon. They'll rip off $200 million and have to pay a $10 million fine. Hello? That's a price of doing business because they don't pay taxes. That's nothing more than the taxes that they're paying. So offshore accounts, no. Done. Overnight, the president simply writes an executive order saying no money shall ever, ever leave this country again into a tax haven. We wouldn't have to charge Americans taxes, IRS. Social Security would be provided by corporations that are skirting around paying taxes. And these corporations, when they're foreign corporations and owned by monarchies in foreign countries, and this is not a stretch of the imagination, the existing monarchies have that, and then the what they call the black monarchies, the monarchy that no longer rule, they still have tremendous power because they all belong to the Knights of Malta, which is the largest insider trading group in the world. So these corporations are more powerful than some nations, and in many cases they control nations. And what we're working with here is a simple process to stop the mechanism of illegality that has been brought over from England, that was taken from the Vatican and Curia law and the Vatican Bank, turned into basically imperialism in England, in Germany, and in Holland, brought to America. They fought over America, and it looks like the Brits won, and we are a British Commonwealth, because what you have revealed with Serco, it's staggering. And we know that all that we've found is still not the full truth. I'm sure there's much more, but those things are probably so hidden that we haven't found them yet.
Well, the contracts that are available online in the U.S., I mentioned the 63 airports and the patent office, but Serco also supplies all the data systems to, guess who? SES and the Office of Personnel Management. They also, in addition to managing FEMA Region 9, they have a contract with the Navy. They have contracts with most of the military, but one's the Navy Space War Program, provide many technology services, not only the federal level, but also the state and local level. And we counted, of the published 5,000 published contracts, 75% are with the Department of Defense, and that totals $6.2 billion that they've received since 2005 to the present time. And that's just the U.S. I haven't even talked about what they do in England and Australia and the Five Eyes countries.
And those Five Eyes will be the ones controlling the Internet of Things and
Yeah.
the wetware that controls the globe. Now, you're nice to the British people. You've been there, and I've been to England many times, and I like the British people a lot. But I'm sorry, I now have to tell you, they are our enemy. Five Eyes, those are five knives in our back, the four knives in our back. Britain is not our friend. They interfered in our election more than anyone. Christopher Steele is an ex-British spy. Stefan Halper, the person who actually was the embedded spy in the Trump campaign, as well as Sergei Parachenko, as well as Carter Page, as well as others, all worked out of, that's right, London. The very man that supposedly Papadopoulos said he wanted the 33,000 emails of Hillary, that the Russians supposedly had. That's a lie. He never said that. He was told that they had that. And the Maltese professor, Professor Joseph, I say his name wrong sometimes, Misfud, M-I-S-F-U-D. Anyway, he was a setup along with Alexander Downer, who was a great donor to Hillary, the Hillary Clinton Foundation. They all worked out of London. In other words,
sounds like Serco staff.
That was an attempt of Brits to overthrow the American presidency. I want all Brits out of all contracts, out of all intelligence agreements. We know that the British came over and used Fort Meade, Maryland as one of the Five Eyes to spy on Trump in Trump Towers, so that we always use foreign intelligence agents to do our dirty work in our own country. And the Brits are the number one. You can't even compare it. You can't name something bad that has happened that the Brits weren't involved in. For instance, the gas attacks in Syria. Who do you think provided the intelligence? Only Brits. And by the way, it looks as if it's an American company, 63, but it's not. It's not. It's a Serco-owned company as part of CACI, so well hidden you can't even find who owns it. And then who do they say they are?
Well, by the way, CACI executives formed the precursor company that Serco bought. So the whole entry of Serco into the U.S. market in 2008 was a setup by Lockheed and CACI back in the late 90s, about the time that the Highlands Forum was obviously getting going in this whole Internet of Things strategy. So all roads lead back to the SDS. And Serco is their, their corporate arm to implement Walker's patent. It's really clear. You can lay the timing of Walker's filings to everything that we've seen occur in the Internet of Things. And so it's now clear that when our technology came along, our social networking invention came along, we whipped the scalability problem that they were having with Microsoft and IBM technologies. And from the very moment I met Professor Chandler, I now know we were going to be the victims of theft of our technology. And what our technology allowed them to do was immediately work on implementing this satellite plan that they've got all over the planet, so that these satellites could talk to each other and could be scalable so that you could manage 24,000 satellites. So we can see what's going on, and knowledge is power. And I think what we've got to do as citizens of this country is rise up now, no longer expect anything but misdirection and lies from our government, and we've got to take our government back as citizens. The Constitution allows us to do that. We have to do it. It is so broken, I do not believe it can be fixed or reformed. It's got to be remade.
I quite agree. And your case with the Miller Act notice, if Trump signs it, he creates a cascade effect to demonstrate that there has been nothing but monopolies involved in Silicon Valley since the time that the IBM Eclipse Foundation was created, and they stole Leader Technologies' social network patents, copyrights, and intellectual property. But now let's just go back. Serco, it was stolen from you by the good people. You mentioned Chandler, but also let's mention the other people who were there. That would be Robert Mueller, Rod Rosenstein, James Comey, Eric Holder, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Michael Kapos,
David Kapos.
I always get his name wrong. The guy who with ICANN, Stephen Crocker. We are talking about the same handful of corrupt people who've done this. Now, they stole it from you, but then look what they did. They let Serco come in, and now
I got to make this point. I've got to make this point. There are a number of patent holders and intellectual property holders that were stolen from in addition to ours. Ours was the framework, but there were a lot of others that were also cheated.
But yours was the one that created the ability for scalability for social networking.
The scalability issue with social networking, yes.
So just like Richard C. Walker's patent, that everything subsidiary to it has to come to it for certification and or approval and or being able to connect to the primary patent. You would have had the primary patent, and when they tried to cheat and put backdoors and tried to surveil, you could have said no. Now, we can do that now.
No, our plan was to say no.
Exactly. And you already had said no.
We already had the controls in place to respect people's personal privacy and property.
And now, you were ripped off in patent espionage theft directly by the government, people in the government who then used it for their own personal gain. What happens now? Serco looks at every single patent, and the company that wishes to put wet works in you and control you in aggressive remote control of all aspects of your life now controls the patent office. So if any new patents come up that can support them or the Richard C. Walker patent of the Internet of Things taking over all things on the earth, they will simply get first choice. So It isn't even Americans stealing from Americans anymore. It's now the British stealing from Americans. And
wait, Douglas. They signed a paper that said that they wouldn't do that.
I know you were going to say
I'm sorry. You just don't get it.
There was a piece of paper
signed.
When
I sign a paper, that just makes me the honest person.
And I'm sure Chandler gave you a piece of paper that said, "I am ethical. Please sign this. I am ethical. You may not sue me."
Multiple versions of that.
Yes, exactly. And he's also the guy who wrote laws that say at the bottom, The law we just made above can be abrogated at any time. We can also, by the way, lie in court cases and have no culpability.
Right.
What a guy.
False Statements Accountability Act of 1996. We can lie.
And so what we see is corruption becomes legal. And now what we see is globalism. You know, we are down on globalism, and people think that we're a little bit too nationalistic and isolationist, but I'm telling you, listen to what we're saying. These are the reasons why we believe this. We can get rid of these companies. We can get rid of offshore accounts. We could transform America in a matter of a few years by simply making a dozen changes. And they're not illegal changes. And there's no American that wouldn't agree with all 12 of these changes. Get rid of the Federal Reserve. Get rid of our debt. Get rid of the United Nations. Get rid of the IRS.
It all comes back to a very simple concept: respect. And the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that can guide our entire Reformation.
Absolutely.
That principle.
Absolutely. That people really do have unalienable rights. I mean, that's really what the golden rule is. You know, you're going to do to others what you want done to you. That is found in every single religion. It is ubiquitous across the earth. That is the one principle that stands as the most ethical principle in all religions. And you're right. Do you think that Serco is using the golden rule when they are doing their work for America?
They use the golden share, not
the golden
rule.
Share. That's right.
You got to get the memo. You didn't get the memo, brother.
I see the golden share has usurped the golden rule.
Well, there you go.
Figured it out. Now
we came up with a new phrase.
Exactly. Well, Michael, I'm going to end this so that we can wrap this up and get it to Betsy and get it out, because your article is shocking. It's phenomenal. We want to warn people ahead of time. You better put your hard hat on, because the truth is being told here. And if you're not prepared for the truth, it can seem like things are falling on your head. But we always give hope, and we always give the directions for solutions. Michael, again, thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome.
And
Great
thanks
to be here.
For all your great work that you guys are doing over there. We'll talk to you soon.